It's on the ground. You can see that clearly on camera.
It's going to be a wild afternoon, everybody.
Oh yeah, it is. It's very active.
Look at that. Look at that. Look at that column, Vanessa. Wow.
Come right here. You can see it going through the cane field.
So many people posting on social media saying they've never seen storms like this before. They've never seen, they're filming it continuously for minutes at a time with lightning going off every few seconds. You know, traditional thunderstorms, you see lightning maybe every few minutes. But for it to be going off, it looks like something out of a movie. It looks like something out of a Lord of the Rings trailer or something like that. So we're seeing all sorts of different patterns, and people are saying that they've never seen storms like this. Are they right, or are they just conspiracy theorists?
I mean, again, this is a matter of the emperor has no clothes. Again, we need to use our sense of reason. It's absolutely occurring. And as far as the excessive lightning now, we have an ionized atmosphere. It's much more electrically conductive.
With each passing minute, more and more lightning activity became visible.
A thunderstorm. Here, I'll pan the camera so that you can see, but that is real time, constant flickering.
Just doesn't stop.
I know. This is crazy.
Yeah, it's insane. Never seen anything like this at all, kiddo.
I know. This is like a once in a lifetime thing.
These particulates are electrically conductive. And we're talking about, based on our lab tests, working with the University of Minnesota, hundreds of lab tests over that state, and extrapolating the amount of climate engineering elements in the precipitation and projecting that globally, it appears as if somewhere in the range of 40 to 60 million tons of toxic electrically conductive nanoparticles are being dispersed into our skies. That creates more static buildup, again, more electrical conductivity in the clouds. Now we have the clouds being blasted with microwave transmission. So it's the atmosphere is being treated as a physics lab and a war zone at this point. And on the chemical ice nucleating elements, which are used to temporarily and toxically cool down surface temperatures in various regions. In fact, that happened. That's another layer for Helene. We had an anomalously less warm region in that part of the U.S., while the rest of the U.S., and for example, where I live in Northern California, it's been 100 degrees plus for about 6 months with no rain. And the no rain part is absolutely a result of climate engineering as well. We can see what they're doing on satellite imagery. It cuts off the precipitation to the west, and that plugs into the wildfire scenario. All these puzzle pieces fit together completely. And on the chemical ice nucleation part, if your listeners search Lake Michigan ice balls, for example, look at the photos of what we don't see on Matrix television, 75-pound perfectly spherical ice balls covering the shores of Lake Michigan. And this is happening in the Baltic Sea, the Arctic. That's what happens with a chemically nucleated element. And for the massive hailstones, when you create this ice nucleation process far earlier and builds up far faster, that's why you end up with that. And that's why now insurance companies suddenly are canceling everybody for hail damage, because now it's off the charts, just like the lightning.
No es normal, señores. Esto es...
Unbelievable. So let's talk about Milton here. And Dane, I'll get you, I want to be respectful of your time. Milton, right? This is about to hit the weather modification here, you've seen evidence of that, the manipulation using these next-rad radar systems off of Cancun to get it back on track. It looked like it was going south more towards Cancun in that direction. You say that it was pushed back to the north. And just can you talk about that? And then also, what is the goal with Florida? Why Florida, right? I mean, at the end of the day, there's got to be a purpose for this. So why are they targeting Tampa specifically? Is there some reason that you've been able to identify, or is that not that's in the realm of speculation at this point?
At Geoengineering Watch, we are careful to only state what we can back up with data. So in regard to the agendas and objectives, there are likely many, and behind closed doors, whatever is going on there for the ultimate goal is difficult to state. What we can state with certainty is these operations are real, ongoing, they're patented processes, they're affecting these storms. And Clayton, if we go one step further, we've had for decades patented technologies to suppress these storms, to stop the convection. We have products like Dynamat designed to reduce the convection and pull the moisture to the surface at minimum. At absolute minimum. If they didn't want these storms to happen, they would not happen. And we're not stating on the spawning of these storms, the oceans are superheating. Nature can certainly spawn these storms, although with atmospheric pressure zone manipulation, which is absolutely ongoing. Again, for decades, this technology has existed. D.A.R.P.A, for example, in Alaska, many of your followers may know what that is. That's an ionosphere heater. It's a weapon of mass destruction. It's not some benign research facility. When you can transmit 3.5 million watts, 3.6 million watts into the electrically charged ionosphere, which causes an electrical chain reaction, superheats that layer of the atmosphere, causing the atmosphere to expand up and down.
It's very unusual for a storm to come in from the west like this and make landfall on the western coast of Florida.
This is historic, right? This is a history-making giant hurricane that is going across the entirety of the state, the central part of the state of Florida, from west coast to east coast.
Oh, there's huge wedge. Oh my God.
You can create and manipulate pressure zones on the surface. That in turn can affect storms like Milton or Helene. So they have the ability to make or break these storms however they form, and they have the ability to direct them. And the reason that normally now, Clayton, you've probably heard the term rapid intensification a lot lately with these storms.
Right.
So what we see now is an attempt to keep the storms from organizing too much too early, where they're over large bodies of water like the Gulf of Mexico, because they're much harder to steer. And perhaps we saw that with Milton, because as you know, Milton spun up much faster and stronger than they initially forecast. And that may have made it harder to steer, why it leaned to the southeast and hung up on the Yucatan Peninsula, and why they had to bump it off because it spun up more than they anticipated, perhaps. So again, there's two layers of the transmission manipulation. There's ionosphere heaters like D.A.R.P.A, of which there's about 100 around the globe. D.A.R.P.A's the biggest and the most powerful. And there's the NextRad network that manipulates from the ground level. And these, again, two separate aspects, but all frequency manipulation and all doing what to the atmosphere? How do we know the overall effects? And what we do know from climate engineering sprayed dispersals in our sky. And again, these are aerosols. This is not condensation. Encourage people to look at videos we have at geoengineeringwatch.org, up close, taken at altitude, nozzles visible, turning dispersions on and off. End of discussion. This is not condensation. So those particles have an oxidizing effect in the ozone layer, which is absolutely imploding. And if the sun feels extremely hot on your skin, on surfaces when you're in unobstructed light, it's not your imagination. We know we're getting UVC on the surface now. That's a DNA damaging spectrum. And we're getting some indication there may be X-ray. That's the final spectrum of UV radiation, indicating there's a functional collapse of the ozone layer close. It's being systematically denied. And it's not from hairspray cans, Clayton, as we were told going back several decades. That's simply smoke and mirrors. Those elements are harmful. CFCs are harmful, but that's a drop in the bucket compared to what climate engineering is doing. And that one aspect of this issue, if we had no other challenges on planet Earth, the functional collapse of the ozone layer alone is a near-term existential threat, and climate intervention operations are the core causal factor. And we have the whole climate science community admitting that if we geoengineer, and they propose, the entire global climate science community is saying they think we should put jets in the sky to spray light scattering particles. It will turn our skies hazy, dirty, milky white, just like we see. It will destroy the ozone layer, just like is happening. It will disrupt the hydrological cycle, exactly as what's occurring. But then they tell us none of this is actually happening yet. So again, we're living in an asylum at this point, and the ozone layer functional collapse alone is a near-term, and I mean extremely near-term, existential threat. And we're metering that UV, Clayton. We had a former NASA contract engineer working directly for us. He just passed away with state-of-the-art equipment, but we're metering this, and it's not being disclosed by any official agency.
The wildfires that swept through Maui are the deadliest in U.S. history in more than a century. At least 100 people have died and more than 850 are missing. On social media, people are speculating about what could have caused the fires. One trending theory is that the fires started due to an attack from a directed energy weapon. 3 viral images appearing to show evidence of directed energy weapons have been shared online.
We're under attack. And I think you brought up, I want to get you out of here on this, Dane, which is the wildfires in Wyoming. Everyone's focused on Milton, but then we see massive wildfires breaking out. And you say they're connected.
They're completely connected. So whatever the source of ignition for the firestorms that are now occurring, we know that climate intervention operations are setting the template for these fires to burn with such ferocity. They're cutting off the hydrological cycle to massive swaths of forests, just like what happened in Canada last year. We have these particles, an incendiary dust. A primary element in climate engineering patents is aluminum, which we're all breathing, by the way. These are nanoparticles. They're very bioavailable. They're very bioaccumulative. They're building up in our systems, and we know this because everyone we test, hair, blood, urine, are packed with these metals. So this cutting off of the hydrological cycle. We have toxic rain because aluminum is toxic to all life forms, period. Bioavailable aluminum, toxic to all life forms. And for those, we get this from some in the science community that claim, well, aluminum is a common element in our strata. We should expect it everywhere. Not free-form aluminum. Free-form aluminum does not exist in nature. It must be mined and refined and dispersed in order for it to be there. And that makes it bioavailable and bioaccumulative. So we have soil microbiome dying. You've heard the trees are dying because of beetles, perhaps, in the western forest, and they blame everything on the beetles. Beetles are a symptom of a sick, dead, dying tree. The toxic rain is killing soil microbiome, killing root systems, which is killing the trees slowly. The UV is killing the trees from the top down. They're studying their stomata, their respiratory ports, so the forests don't smell like forest anymore. You have no smell in the forest because the trees are not breathing, they're not respirating, they're not absorbing carbon, they're not releasing oxygen. They're dying slowly and they're dormant. So we have more lightning. We just discussed that, right? We have more dry lightning now because the particles affect precipitation. So we have more sources of ignition. And all these elements, as part of climate engineering operations, that's what's setting the template for these fires to burn. And to add credence to this, we have peer-reviewed science study. We have an engineering wildfire section on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. We have peer-reviewed study actually advocating for the intentional burning of northern latitude forests in order to provide temporary cooling, burning forests as a form of climate engineering to mimic the temporary toxic cooling effect of a volcano.
I mean, this is what Bill Gates has said publicly, that we should burn the forests in order to cool the planet. I mean, this is the madness that we're dealing with right now.
Absolute, total, utter insanity.
Thanks to the Cooperative Institute for Research in the Atmosphere, here you can see these images. The trio Hurricane Milton, Hurricane Kirk, and Hurricane Leslie all developing. Milton became a Category 1 hurricane in the Gulf Coast yesterday.
And of course, right now, Monday evening, it is the strongest hurricane on record in the Gulf of Mexico during the month of October.
How bad do you think it's going to be with Hurricane Milton in Florida?
There's no way to know with certainty because the storm is being manipulated. They can knock the convection down at the last moment, or they can spin it up further. It's a matter of drafting that storm and eliminating any wind shear at altitude. So again, when they're manipulating upper level wind currents, they have the ability to do this. And below the areas that are baking, and this is part of the wind current and pressure zone manipulation. You see in the west here, Clayton, I mean, we are baking. It's off the charts. And so climate engineering can augment that. And we're not denying other sources of damage to the planet at geoengineeringwatch.org. I want to make that clear. We recognize we've been really poor stewards of the planet, period. There's no way to really deny that. I mean, we're contaminating everything and cutting down forests, and there's a lot of problems that need to be addressed. But that being said, the intentional toxic intervention in the planet's life support systems is pounding the nails into our collective coffins, contaminating every breath we take. So under these high pressure domes, which I described earlier, when you have an ionosphere heater causing this electrical chain reaction in the ionosphere, pushing that air down under a high pressure heat dome, and that's what we're experiencing here in the West, and that can crush the convection in a cyclone as well. So they have so many levers at their disposal, Clayton, and we can, again, speculate about all the various agendas and objectives being carried out. But the fact that these operations are totally and completely out of control, off the rails, this is a headless, heartless, soulless cancer that is, at this point, again, completely out of control. And Clayton, I'm sure you hear people say, well, why would they do this to themselves? We hear it all the time at geoengineeringwatch.org. Why would they, aka those who print the money, do this to themselves? And I would point out, how much have they done to themselves already? Detonating 2,400 nuclear bombs that contaminated everything and everyone, including, quote, them, those behind these operations. We have Fukushima, triple nuclear meltdown, no technology to fix it, no end in sight. Chernobyl's about to rear its head again because the sarcophagus is disintegrating there. We have 442 nuke plants online right now. We have 60 more under construction. And even in that, even the potential of nuclear cataclysms is connected to the threat of climate engineering, because now that our compromised atmosphere, which we just talked about, the ozone layer disintegrating, if we have a massive CME or coronal mass ejection, which is inevitable at some point, something the size of the Carrington event that happened in the 1800s, that would shut down grids around the globe. Now we have nuclear plants everywhere that can't cool themselves. Now we have 100 Fukushimas or 200, game over. So from every conceivable direction, climate engineering, again, is the most dire and immediate threat we face short of nuclear cataclysm. And even with the nuclear cataclysm part, they're connected.